lot of people are interested in the Roman Empire. Did the Roman Empire ever fall? Are we still in the Roman Empire? What's this thing about a Holy Roman Empire? These are all good questions, and we're going to answer some of them right now. So first of all, the Roman Empire fell in 500. And even though we say that, the eastern half of the Roman Empire continued on for another 1,000 years. But we say that the western half of the Roman Empire, and they were split 200 years before this in 300. And that's when Constantine, the famous guy who made Rome Christian, he was the guy who moved the capital from Rome to Constantinople. So the next 200 years are just basically more of that. And so officially Rome loses all its power and is sacked in 500. So then when is this term Holy Roman Empire? We already know that there's already still a Roman Empire going on. It's just in the east and we don't care about it, and they're messing with the Muslims. But the Holy Roman Empire is still Western, so we care about it. So first of all, what is the Holy Roman Empire? It is the sense of European imperialism that begins in 800 and finally ends in like the 1800s, in the modern era. Now, the first Holy Roman Emperor was Charlemagne. I'm sure you've heard his name. Charlemagne was essentially French, and France was contesting for this title of the second round of the Roman Empire, and they have a good reason to. When Rome was around, France was a territory. They called it Gaul, and at the height of Roman civilization, around the time of Julius Caesar, which is like 30 years before Christ, this is the pinnacle of Rome. Julius, begins his career by uniting all of Gaul and putting all of Gaul under Roman control. So Gaul was essentially Roman. And in fact, Rome exported a lot of its culture to Gaul, such that the later deterioration that happened in Roman culture after that, didn't really happen in Gaul. So French, in the Middle Ages, the Dark Ages after Rome, France is, a good successor to the title of a Rome-like city-state. So the first Holy Roman Empire, Holy Roman Emperor, is French, and his name is Charlemagne. Now, 400 years go by, and there's different struggles and lords and powers, and you basically have a contest today known as feudalism, where there wasn't really so much of one unified empire. There was networks of allegiances and provinces, and each lord could kind of, tax his realm and had conscript soldiers. So power was very fractured. In order to have influence, you had to have a lot of lords swear oaths to you. And so eventually this is how the second Holy Roman Emperor got power. And his name was Barbarossa. Barbarossa was not French, he was German. And one of the complicated things about German history at this time, Germany's full of rivers and woods and thick forests. So it makes for kind of a fractal political structure. Each town kind of has their own ways. The roads aren't good at this time, so you can't really get control. But Barbarossa knitted together a lot of these allegiances, and through some feat of political brilliance, unites them all into one empire. And it says, okay, I'm the Holy Roman Empire now. Now it's important to mention this term Holy Roman Emperor, because why is the first one just Rome and this one's holy? Well, this one has a pope for much of its history. It has a pope. And there's this brooding conflict between what the pope can do and what the actual emperor can do. By the way, do you know the first emperor of Rome? What's his name? Augustus. He crowns himself emperor, and this is kind of a big deal because right before he took the place of after Julius Caesar got assassinated. In fact, he was like kind of his protege. And the thing that people got so mad about Caesar for was Caesar came in, was basically said, I can do whatever I want because I'm so awesome. And he's awesome. And acts like a dictator. And people are like, well, I don't like it, but he gets stuff done. But as soon as they say, you know what, I actually am the king, I'm the emperor, people are like, no! So that happens with Caesar. And ever since then, even when Augustus calls himself emperor because they'd already broken the seal, it's a skeptical power. There's still senates in place. There's still some form of, adversary that challenges the emperor, and he can't just call it his. So the Holy Roman Emperor has not only a pope, but an emperor trying to curtail favor from the pope. And the more he can do to act the part of like this divine right of a king, the more support he has to do what he wants. So Charlemagne really instituted this. He's like obsessed with people knowing about how pious he is and how hygienic and polite and observant and pious and sexually pure his court is. So that really, during this period from Charlemagne 800s to 1200s, Charlemagne de Barbarossa, that's what we've covered so far, where we have really the Middle Ages take effect. That's why the Middle Ages are so romantic, because it's, it's just a lure with these quests for purity and piety and given a divine right from God. And so both of those kings claimed themselves to be emperors of this Holy Roman Emperor under the title of God. And you think about it, it's kind of weird because one of these guys is French, the other guy is German, and so how can the same kingdom actually have capitals at totally opposite places in the world, totally different countries? That doesn't make sense. Well, you see that the actual seat of power is a little bit more of a technicality than it is, because in each war of succession, the winner essentially says, no, I'm the rightful heir. I am the inheritor of I represent the kingdom. So basically, whoever's the toughest and the strongest gets to say, I have the divine right of God. I am the emperor. And so the third time we see this happen, where the Holy Roman Emperor is yet again a new person wearing the hat, is on the east. So we went from France to German to Austria. And this is the famous Austro-Hungarian Empire that would rule for another 1,200 years and eventually be dissolved in what? World War I, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, because they started World War I. This was the most powerful ruling family maybe ever to hit textbooks. The Habsburgs. The Habsburgs were in control of the Holy Roman Empire dynasty for like 1,200 years. They picked the popes. They had a lot of Spain under control. And this has to go, and now you could go down a whole rabbit trail of the history of the Reformation, because the countries that were Catholic were generally tied up with the Pope, and the Pope was generally tied up with the Habsburgs. And then the powers of the Reformation and the Protestants and countries like Germany and then the UK, who really break away from the Pope. You could talk about the religious history of Protestantism. And then just to go one further thing down, if you talk about religious history, you're great to talk about art history, because a lot of the art that's moving and powerful and like, oh my God, Jesus has 10 bullet holes in his side. Why did they show this? It was the church putting money to protest the Reformation and bring people back into the church by appealing to, by being sensational and emotional. So a lot of art was paid for as part of a political battle. Anyway, Holy Roman Emperor was first Charlemagne, and then Barbarossa, and then finally the Habsburgs. So who was the last Holy Roman Emperor? Well, we know he was a Habsburg, and he was from the Habsburg dynasty, the most powerful political franchise in European history. But the person to actually defeat him in a brilliant battle was Napoleon. And although Napoleon crowns himself emperor and kind of plays the same game of like, no, we're the new blah, 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 blah empire, we're the thing, Napoleon actually erected a lot of modern democratic process and order. Even though he was a famous micromanager, he really put a lot of intention and effort into building institutions and programs and colleges and basically features of self-governance. And actually the Napoleonic bureaucracy system, government system, even though they defeated Napoleon eventually, they because they were so humiliated by his victory, they conspired to dethrone him, and they eventually did. But Napoleon's style of government lasted into the 20th century. And it's a beautiful thing too, because you have the French Revolution was basically the beginning of Napoleon's career, and it ends with him bringing a brilliant form of focus to government. Because before this was the French monarchy, and they were hated. That's why the French Revolution was so bloody. There was still this persistent idea of the divine right of kings, that kings could do whatever they want. And Napoleon was the one to kind of give the world a new way to order. People were afraid to give up the divine right of kings because they thought the next step was just mob rule, chaos. And Napoleon created some systems in place that we could see a way to kind of break down the political system and make it a little more functioning. So did Rome ever end? Well, by all standards, America is Rome today. We have a strong army. We have a constitution that we're proud of. We have an honor of tradition and a continuing struggle for improvement. America is Rome. But when I think of what makes Rome great, I think of this story. On that city, with 7 hills that are still there in Rome, there was a rule that if the elected officials weren't doing a good enough job, all the working class would just leave the city. And they'd just leave the city. Be like, we don't need you. We're going to go back to fending for ourselves. And then the politicians would be like, all right, hold on, come on, let's renegotiate your terms of enslavement. I'll make them a little bit better. And this didn't happen just once or twice. This was like an honored tradition. This thing worked. So, realistically, it doesn't matter who gets to call themselves the functioning government of the world. The empire that will last is one where democracy, in its most honest form, not by writ or law, but democracy in the sense of this point of conflict between the masters and the slaves, this point of understanding, where the masters who have ambitions get to honor their purpose, and the slaves that want peace and civility get to honor their purpose, and they both work in harmony. And we need to all be like that example of Roman citizens leaving, willing to go to economic war in order to defend their fair share of that bargain. When those forces are understanding and in a peaceful war with each other, the universe is right. Maybe I got to tell one more story, because we started asking this question of, did Rome ever fall? Did the Holy Roman Empire ever fall? Are we still in the Roman Empire? And realistically, it doesn't matter, because as soon as one falls, another picks back up under a different name. And whoever gets to last and survive and call themselves the king, it really doesn't matter. So then what happens now in our society, where we're facing an empire that is struggling? And sure, there's a lot of problems in this country. So how can we feel motivated to take the lessons from history and enact them towards positive social change? How can we feel inspired with positive visions for the future? I had to share this story about a guy who was reading Malcolm X. And I was like, tell me something about it, because I'm a great admirer of Martin Luther King. And at my core, I'm a Jedi. I believe that peace is the ultimate weapon. But Malcolm X took the opposite position, and I need to know why. Because if you study history, the tides of power are never an accident. And the most cruel tricks were used to win over the throne. In other words, cheating usually is the way history gets written. And this is the sad fact of Earth. So I asked him, is that what you believe? That violence is the ultimate answer for change? And he said, it depends. It depends on how strong the opposition is. You know, like in Malcolm X's case, he was fighting systemic racism. He was fighting a whole embedded culture, and maybe he saw no way to win that fight except by seizure, like Caesar. But we do know this, and I hope someone didn't make up this story, that in his later years, we know Malcolm X softened and conceded a little bit to Martin Luther King and said that, you know what, nonviolence is the most lasting, the most impacting, and the most fully integrated way of social change. and it is better than violence. So Malcolm X changed it a little bit. He changed his mind. His beliefs shifted from when he was a young man to when he didn't become an old man. He was an assassin. He was assassinated, but when he became older. So this is what I like to think. I like to think that no matter how bad things seem, we might think that violence is our only option. But I think that Malcolm X, as he became older, and as he was given more of God's eyes and more wisdom of his years, more experience just to see how stories turn out, maybe he could see, you know what, we're actually not that far away. Maybe he could see the very few things, oh, maybe this is a little bit off, let's just adjust this dial, and everything will be back on track. Maybe with God's eyes, he could really see that, you know what, love's gonna win. Things aren't really that bad. And I think about if we could have those eyes looking for miracles and knowing how close they are, knowing how easy it is for one positive change to affect a tidal wave, maybe our whole world would shift, our whole world perspective would shift, and we'd think, you know what, climate change, racism, violence, censorship, all these things, it's just a small thing. Ain't nothing but a thing. We got it. We got it.